Okay, hello. Good morning. Morning, Sue. Yeah, morning, Charlotte, as well. Sue, quick one about the enrollment. I'm going to send them out after the session for this one. So if you are in the chat, let me know, and I will be chasing you guys up for those. I'll make sure my number's on there in case there's anything on there that you didn't understand or get. And I'll, like I say, I'll have a conversation with you guys after the session. So we're back in the good old Hit Film Express. As you can probably tell from the title, I've managed to actually title the session. So we're going to have a little look at motion tracking. And to do that, before we do that, as a little starter activity, you're going to have a little recap as well on some of the keyframing and stuff. So just a dead simple look into it. So I'm going to play you a little video almost in the style of, here's one I made earlier, if I can find the video itself. 2 seconds, I've got like a million folders open. So we open up that. Yeah, so as you can see from the text I've added on there, I often have very stimulating conversations such as that, because I'm such a fun and witty young man. Yeah, so that basically, motion tracking is you see here when before I'll go to when it animates in. So it animates in from the phone, so the message is coming in from the phone, and as the phone's moving within the frame, the animation itself, the message pop-up is staying tracked to the phone, so it's pinned to that phone, and this is done by a method called motion tracking. So you track the motion of an object within the program of Hit Film Express. So you're telling it, okay, I want to track the phone there, and wherever that phone moves, that's where that tracking point will follow. Now, I'll explain why we do it the way we do it in using the built-in tools in the program, and we don't do it by hand from scratch, because it would be an absolute nightmare. So first of all, I'm just gonna, as always with these ones, go to File and New, and then I'm going to go and leave it probably on these settings. I might change, just so I've got a little bit of time to work with. Instead of it being 5 seconds, I might make that 10. 25 frames per second is fine. Square pixels, the audio sample rate's fine. 1080 full HD at 25 frames per second. Leave it on that. We'll okay that box there. And then Hit Film will do its thing, hopefully. Or it might crash. We'll see. One of the two. There it goes. Right, so you probably won't see this because these are videos that I've previously exported. When I've got ones that I've previously exported that I want rid of, I literally just highlight them like that and just press delete. Or you want to cancel and remove the selected task. Well, you can see there that they've finished exporting, so I don't actually need to worry about these anymore, so I can just get rid of them. And now my export queue is now empty, so I can just go back to my viewer here. So this is just a blank project. It's for some reason ignored the fact that I wanted 10 seconds. So I'm just going to drag that out to 10 seconds. And this is where you would start importing all the different assets. Now, in the description of the video, I have included a link to a Google Drive folder. And that's got in it all the assets that I used to create the animation, including the sound effects. So everything you need is in that folder. And you should just be able to click straight onto it. In fact, I'll open it now and just show you what it looks like. Give me a sec. So it should look something like this. Yours might be laid out slightly different, but can you see I've included some extra footage in there if you want to have another go at something different. So I've got the phone footage where she's walking along with her phone, but I've also got some footage of a man surfing. So yeah, the ones I'm using are the 2 sound effects, and then the phone footage, and I've put 2 message bubbles in there, which I just made using the shape tool in Photoshop. So if anyone wants to make some different ones, that's fine. Go for it. Encourage that. If you want your message just to look slightly different, you can do it this way. So I literally just, I'll double click on it to open it, but I just drew with the rounded rectangle in Photoshop, and then I just drew a custom shape on the corner to make a little point. And as you can see from the transparency here, so this little checkerboard, this is a PNG as well, and that just allows it to animate in without a background on, which is useful. So when you're saving stuff out of Photoshop, if you are making anything and you want to bring it into HitFilm Express or whatever animation tool you're using, it's handy to have them as PNGs. Sometimes you can bring them in as Photoshop files. What I've found with that is it makes it really laggy, because you can import a Photoshop file in and it'll understand all the separate layers, but it's constantly referencing that big bloated PSD file with all the different layers in, even if it's only taken one small layer. So I tend not to do that if my computer's struggling a little bit. I separate them out into PNGs. But have a go both ways and see how you get on. I personally, this computer doesn't particularly like it when you bring in the PSDs. It prefers the PNGs for some reason. But either way is fine, so it doesn't really matter. So this is where you would come to import it. So remember, over in the left hand side, you've got your media panel, and then you've got the import button. So if I press import, mine's automatically opened up to the folder where I had all the stuff. For now, I'm just going to import these 2 message buttons, because that's what we're going to start with. We're just going to start with a dead basic when I'm showing you how to animate the bubbles in. I will actually grab the sound effect as well of the sending one, and I need to find the ding sound effect, the little when the bell's being rung. Mine must be somewhere else on my computer. Give me a second. I think it's in here. Yeah, there it is. So all I've imported into there is the 2 sound effects. So I've got a ding sound effect, a phone sending a message, like a message going out, and then 2 message bubbles, incoming and outgoing. And the only difference is the color and where the little arrow's coming from. So as you remember from last week, I'm just going to minimize this tracking panel a little bit so I've got a bit more space. As you remember from last week, when we're doing animation stuff, we normally do it within a composite shot. And the reason we do that is the composite shot can then just be dragged. So it, in your editor here, if I start making an animation, it's a little bit tricky and you get fewer options in terms of animating and stuff. If you make a composite shot, and I just call it phone message, and I keep it exactly the same, I'm going to knock the duration down to, I'm going to put that to 10 seconds as well, I think. And I'm just going to OK that. So that's opened up a new composite shot here, and this allows me to bring in multiple layers that I can animate and make disappear, and they can do all sorts of stuff. And then I can drag the composite shot. So can you see here, it's made a composite shot. I can drag that into my main timeline, and none of the separate layers get affected when it's in here. They only get affected when it's in here. So it's essentially, when you put it on the overall video, it merges down into one when you bring it into here. But when it's in your composite shot, it's got all the separate bits in here. So imagine this like a little group that you would use in Photoshop or Photopea. Very useful, and you get some more options with what you can do with them as well. So made me composite shot, called it phone message. I'm just going to drag in the buttons for now, and what they're going to do is they'll drop right into the center. So they've centralized themselves. So I don't actually want that at the moment. I want them to be in the right position that they would be if I was getting messages on screen. So to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this little layout panel on the right hand side. So underneath, next to, it'll say meters, which is measuring your sound, which at the minute I haven't got any sound in here. So I'm just going to drag that across, click that across, sorry, onto layout. And can you see I've got a few layout options here, which I briefly touched on last week. So this is the position, this is how you align them. So whichever one you select, so let me just drag them apart a little bit so we can actually see what's going on. So obviously this one's the message coming in. So I wanted it to look like we've got a message from someone else first, and then we're going to reply to it using this bubble. So to do that, I want its finishing position. So the position when it's animated in, I want that to be about there. So can you see there? I pressed the top alignment. So there's like a little bar for it to align to the top, and then I pressed the align horizontal left. So that was a line vertical top, that takes it to the top of the frame. And then there was a line vertical left, which takes it to the left. So I took that, without me having to drag and drop it, I've used these settings. If I click them, can you see it's going to put them in the corresponding position? So there's a direct center there if I press the center on both. So if I press that and then that puts it in the center. If I wanted it in the top left like I just did, can you see there's a horizontal left? So there, automatically puts it to the left. And then if I wanted to the top, there's this one for top here, and that automatically aligns that to the top as well. So I did cover that briefly, but just to go back over it, and then that's on this layer. So you can see the blue outline, that's doing that layer. The one underneath is the message that you'd be sending as a reply. So we want that to be in the bottom right. So to put that in the bottom right, we're using the same buttons, but we're doing it in the opposite direction. So we want it to be aligned on the right, and we want it to be aligned on the bottom. Yeah, so that's put them in there. What you might also want to do is maybe increase the size of them a little bit, because within that frame, can you see we've got a little bit of a gap in between where they are. So if you want to do that, remember, little drop down on the layers themselves, and then transform, and you've got a scale, so they'll come in automatically at 100%. So we'll just drag that up just a touch, and you can, if you hover over these, you get the little arrow that's side to side. If you click and drag on that, if you drag to the left, that reduces the size. If you drag to the right, that increases the size. You can also click in the box there and edit the number. So you could type in 125, and that would make it 125% scale. So I've scaled that up by 25% essentially. And what that's done there is that sort of knocked my alignment out of whack. So I just need to click back onto my layer that I want to move and do the same thing again. So just make sure it's aligned to the right and aligned to the bottom like that. Now 125% looks like it might be a bit big. So let's try 115 and realign them like that. And then obviously this one's now bigger than this one, so I need to do that as well. So go back to my drop down on this top left one, and then go to transform and set that to 115, press enter, and then just realign. So I want to make it left and top. Yeah, so now we've filled a bit more of the frame, so there's not as many gaps in there. Does that make sense to everyone? Let me know if I've gone too fast with that. I can go back over that. But that essentially, that's going to be the position in which they finish. Yeah, so when they've animated in, that's where I want them to sit. So this one's going to come in from this side, this one's going to come in from this side. That's the point at which I want them to be done. So remember, you've got animate in, animate out. So they start off the frame, so outside of the view, and then they're going to animate in. So outside the view, animate in. So that's the point I want them to finish. So if I can, 2 seconds, I'm just going to mute my phone. Group chat's going crazy. So that's the point I want them to finish, but obviously I need them at the start. So when we're at 0 seconds, I need them to be off the screen. So if I know the point I'm going to finish at, I can add a keyframe a little bit further down the line to say this is the point I want you to stop at. So if I go, say I'm going to move it to a second in like that. So if you see there, you probably just about make that out. You'll see better on your screen. That is, the playhead is now 1 second, and it sort of says the time in this little box where it is. So if you couldn't quite drag and drop your playhead here to be exactly on 1 second, so say I'm on 102 there, if I click in the box and type it in so it's 1 second, it'll jump back. Granted, the numbers aren't very big on the screen, so if you are struggling with that, I'm sorry, but you will, like I say, when you see yours, the timer of where the playhead is here. So obviously 0 is the start, and then 1 second where I've dragged this line to now. And then what I want to do is drop down the transform and go to me position. So remember, this little circle adds a keyframe, and the keyframe are the points where it is in any given time. So at this point in time, at 1 second into this little video that I've made, I want to just click a keyframe on the position. Yeah, so can you see it's added me a little keyframe in there. Now at the minute, because it's the only one in there, there's no movement, so I haven't set 2 points where one point's telling it to be off here and the other point's telling it to be across there. So all I need to do is go backwards, because I know this is the end point, so this is where I wanted to finish. I just need to go and tell it where I wanted to start. So I just drag that back to 0, and then I can literally, as long as I've got this selected and I've got my move tool, I can drag that red arrow off to the side there. So, and can you see what it's done there? It's added a keyframe there. So now I've got 2 points in time. One of them is telling it I want the square to be here, and then the other one is telling it, so this one here is telling it I want it to be there. Yeah, and remember that's how, all we did, basically most of what we did last week, or most of what we looked at, sorry, the week before last, was the keyframes and what they do. So the program, the animation program, or the animation aspect of HitFilm Express works out the bit in between. So I've told it start here, finish there. It works out all them points in between to give it that little gentle scroll, and that is a 1 second animation, because that's the gap in between there. Yeah, so if you remember what I said in that first session was, if you want to make the animation faster, so can you see if I play it at the minute, it sort of does like a little bit of a scroll, it's a little bit slow. So if you want to speed this animation up, what you can do is you can get the end keyframe and take it a bit further in. So the closer these keyframes are, the faster that motion is going to happen. So I've just dragged that in, just click and drag on it in. And can you see that's a little bit quicker now? Now what I'm probably going to do is just move my timeline up a little bit using this option on the bottom, so that I can see. So if I drag that, can you see it stretches out the timeline? So I'm not actually moving the keyframes there. I'm just seeing in more detail the amount of time along the top. So the keyframes aren't moving, that's the same amount of time, but I'm expanding my timeline. So can you see now, I can see the little lines of like increments of before this hits a second. So I'm going to drag it to the first one, my playhead, and then I'm just going to drag my keyframe to match. So now you can see how close my keyframes are on this small view. So if I play that, it really just pings in. So that's how you increase the speed of your animations, if you remember. So I'm having that one just come straight in like that. So that's the one coming in. What I need to do now is the one where, as if we were sending the message. Now, we don't want them to come in at the same time, because if you think about receiving a text message, you would get the message first, then you would type, so there'd be a little gap in between, and then you would send the message. So there needs to be a gap in between these two animations. So that first message needs to come in, yeah, and then there needs to be a little gap in between where there's some like dead space, where this isn't here, and then after that message has been sent, that needs to ping into the screen. So if I have a look where them keyframes are, I know that I can, as that's come in, so it starts off, it comes in, I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap, I'm going to let it go till about 3 seconds. So again, set my time to 3 seconds on there, and then I'm going to drop down this one, and if you remember, this is the end point we're at, so actually I'm going to let that run for another second. So I'm just going to drag it along till that says 4 seconds there. This is my end point. So I'm going to add a keyframe for position, because this is where, that's the point I wanted to finish at. And I need to just go a little bit back. So just drag the player head a little bit back so that it's in line with there. And then remember, I grabbed that red arrow and just dragged off. So what I'd say with these is you need to be careful which way around you get this, because if I'd gone the other way, if I dragged the playhead the other way, it would animate the other way, so it would start on the screen and go off. So you just need to think about where your start and finish positions need to be. So what I've done there is this point here that I've just added, the one on the left, is telling it to be off the screen. Then the point that's on the right, if I move to now, there is telling it to be on the screen. So if I just play that through, little gap, and then that message comes in. And at any point, you can come back into this phone message, composite shot, and change these layers. Yeah, so you can drop them down. You can say, actually, that one is coming in a little bit too slow, so I could highlight both of those keyframes, keeping the same distance between them, but I could have it happen a little bit earlier in the timeline. So instead of after 4 seconds, I could have it on 3. I could have it start happening on 3 seconds, like that. So if I play that back through now, so there's a little bit less of a gap in between, basically. Yeah, I'm gonna keep it on 4 because I have a feeling that was about right. In fact, let me just stick it on there. So you just, when you're doing stuff like this, it's best, I make small changes to the speed and stuff, and then I go back through and I just play it back through, have a little look at your viewer until you're happy with it. Yeah. So you might be thinking that's just 2 message bubbles with nothing on them. Fair enough. Fair criticism. What I'm going to show you now is how to put some text on. But the reason I didn't put the text on first is because I wanted to get this animation right. So I wanted to be happy with that coming in and that coming in. Yeah. So what we can do now, which is quite good, is we can parent some text to it. So what parenting does is it inherits the animation of whatever you've parented to. So if I bring some text in and make the parent layer, this top one, the text will automatically follow that animation path that I've created. So each time, if I know 2 things need to do the same movement, the exact same movement at the exact same time, I can use the parenting feature. So I'll add a text layer in, which if you guys remember is there's like a little A. Well, it's not a little A, it's a capital A. It'll be the 3rd option down there. And I'm just going to click roughly on that top one there. And let's type some text in. So my text come in and it's too small and it's white, so you can't really see it. It's been sort of washed out. So if I come down into this bottom left panel and I go over to text, so there'll be a text thing there. Sometimes that's hidden, so sometimes you can't quite see that. There'll be a little arrow there that you can press and then the text tab will pop up. So I think I need to highlight it. So I'm going to highlight my text just to be safe. And then I'm going to make the color black. Yeah, and then I'm going to make the size, let's try 100. Yeah, so 100. And then if I go back to my move tool, or selection tool, sorry, which the shortcut for that is V. And then I can move my text up and down using these arrows till I get it into the center of that bubble. So, but if I don't parent it, I'll show you what happens. So can you see it's staying still at the minute there. So to give it the same animation as that bubble, I drop that down and message buttons incoming, so the message that's coming in, if I click there, that's now parented that. So if I move this, can you see the text is now part of that bubble? So it's using the exact same animation as that bubble, and that's called parenting. So the reason it's called parenting is because it inherits the animation path, which is the one we made before, where it's just coming from off the screen to on the screen. Let me know if I've skipped over anything you guys want. Obviously, I know Sue, you were saying you've got an issue with the cursor on your laptop, seems to be slightly out of sync with the screen. That's possibly a bit of lag in HitFilm Express. The way around that is I've found is if you just try and take your time with how many things, like how many clicks you're doing. It does run a little bit slowly from time to time, so don't worry about it and just try your best to like keep on with it basically. But hopefully that parenting makes sense. So that's it. You know, that text is now, can you see here if I just kind of expand that a little bit. So by default it'll be on none, so you can see those are on none, but the new text layer, which I'm actually going to rename. So to rename a layer, instead of new text, I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to go to rename, and I'm going to call that message in. Yeah, so that's the message coming in. And then I'm going to create a new text layer again, but I'm going to scroll along to the point where I can see this box so I can put the text in it. So I'm going to go back to me capital A, click in there, and then I'm going to type yes, you. And then it's inherited the same, remember it's got the same settings as this text, which is handy. So all I need to do is now move it. So back to my selection tool, and should just be able to drag that roughly into the center of there. Message outgoing. Yeah, so I've got that in the center. And then remember, so at the minute it'll not be doing, you can see it's just sitting still. So I just need to drop that list down and parent it to message buttons outgoing, because that's the message going out, as in the one I've sent. So can you see now it moves along with it. So it's just moving from right to left in there with that. Yeah, so that's parenting. So why that's useful, like I say, is things like this. So if you know text and an object are going to are separate, the two separate layers. Yeah, so can you see these layers are all separate, but I know that in groups, so these two here need to move together, and these two here need to move together in exactly the same way. So instead of me having to come in and do all those keyframes again, like I did on the message buttons, those two keyframes that I put in, I can just apply those keyframes to these text layers, which is really, really useful. Saves you a lot of time. You don't have to constantly keep animating loads of different layers. It's really helpful if you've got a lot of stuff going on. This is quite a basic example of it. But if you do any longer animation project, you'll really start to appreciate parenting and like where things sit. I tend to use Photoshop quite often as well when it comes to it, because PNGs are great because they don't have a background attached to them, so you can get custom shapes like this as well. So honestly, have a go. For you guys, because you're not doing it for commercial purposes as well, you'll be able to just grab stuff off Google like PNGs and logos and things like that. You'll be able to use any sort of font you want, because you're just using it to learn. Yes, Sue, I will be able to check your laptop settings for you and see if we can get Film Express running the best way possible. And yeah, Charlotte as well. That is a good way to do it. Like, listen along, watch the demo, and then have a go. I appreciate. I mean, well, we appreciate that it's sometimes pretty hard to pick up stuff like this. Is it better to place the animated shapes first then parent? Yes, so that's why I did it that way around. So I placed the shapes first, animated them, because I know that the text's going to sit within them. So whatever the bigger element is, basically, so this speech bubble, message bubble thing is bigger than the text was going to be. So I knew this one was going to be the one I'd have to align correctly so that it wasn't overlapping, say, the top or the side of the screen. And then I brought the text in because I knew that was going to sit inside of that there. But hopefully that parenting stuff makes sense. I can recover it if needs be. One thing I often forget to do outside of renaming my layers, which I will do now, and that is another thing. Like, I might, on the smaller ones, sometimes I forget because there's only 4 layers in here, so it's pretty easy to work out. If you've got 100 layers in an animation that's like 5 minutes long, if you haven't renamed your layers, you're going to have a really bad time. You're going to get stressed. So just try your best. Same with like Photoshop and Photopea, you guys will know from that. It's good to keep your structure so you know what's what, and you can quickly see and move stuff. And you know, it's just, it works the same as in Photoshop. You can lock layers, so no more changes can be made to them, and you can also turn them off. If you know you don't want a layer anymore, you can turn that one off. Equally with the parent and stuff as well, worth noting, if you turn the parent layer off, it should probably turn the other layer off as well. I think that's the way it works in After Effects. But anyway, don't worry about that. So parenting, name your layers, that's how it works. So if I play the animation back through now, we left a little gap in the middle and then the message going out. So what I'm going to do with all of them is I'm going to enable motion blur, which is that, if you remember from last week, it just makes the motion look a little bit smoother. It gives it like a blur as it's moving. So as it's moving in and out, it will have a little bit of blur on it, which is a little bit more realistic and how your eyes would see it if something's moving in real life. I'm doing lots of hand waving today. Very expressive. So remember to enable motion blur, select the layer, right click on it, go up to options, obviously visible. Make sure you don't untick visible, because if you do untick that, it'll disappear and you might be wondering why. But then just click on motion blur as well, and I'm going to do that on all of them. So up to options, motion blur, so right click, options, motion blur, and last but not least, options, motion blur. Cool. So you might not see it in the render because sometimes it doesn't really play it back that well, but when you export it, it'll have the motion blur on. And one way to check is to physically pick up your timeline marker here and see there. Now I can see that's a little bit blurred when I'm between the frames moving. So if I do that on this one as well, just to double check. Yeah, so you can see it's got that little bit of blur. So the in between those two keyframes that I dropped in before, it's now blurring as it moves. Yeah. So sometimes, because I've got my render quality down on 1/4, so if I put it on full, in fact I'm not even going to do it because I know it's going to crash my computer. So that's another way, Sue, as well, to get your settings to be a little bit, or to make it less likely to crash, is to have your render settings on quite low. So I've got mine on 1/4, so the resolution is 1/4 of what it'll be when you output it. So it's 1/4 of full HD at the moment, which is why you can see it's a little bit like boxy when I move it. It's some pixelation and stuff. Plus this one on mine at the minute is fairly straightforward. Like, it's 2 PNGs and a bit of text. There's not a lot for it to work out. You'll see in a minute when I jump onto the phone footage and start doing the tracking that it starts to struggle a little bit more. That's not unique to HitFilm Express, and that's not unique to your computer either. It's just a combination of the both. It's quite complicated software, and it requires quite a bit of processing power and your graphics card as well. So don't worry about that, and just try and bear with it. Things will crash. It's happened to us quite often, especially when exporting recently, putting videos out, and it's just, you know, crashed or failed or whatever. So just bear with it. Remember to save as well. That's one thing I haven't done. You know, it's been 32 minutes and I haven't saved this, so if it did crash now, I might lose it. So what I will do is file and save as. I'm just going to drop it on my desktop for now, and I'm just going to call it session 1 animation. So remember to save, and that's basically the text animation. So that I just wanted to do a little recap on keyframes. I wanted to introduce you guys to the idea of parenting. And now what we need to do is we need to start thinking about the tracking. So where is this little animation that we've created, where is it going to sit? What's it going to do? So at the minute it's just playing and it's pretty bland. To be fair, you know, you could make just an animation of a phone screen. So you could drop in a phone screen in the background and have these animate onto it. Like just a PNG of a phone screen and have these animate onto it. That might be a good little starter project for you guys. We're gonna go a bit further than that today, and we're gonna attach this. We're gonna pin this to that footage of that woman walking along with her phone. He says, one thing I'm gonna show you. It's gonna seem like slightly the wrong order, but I just want to show you guys how you can edit your composite shots again. So I'm not gonna add the sound yet. The sound would be added in here in this phone message composite shot that I've made, but I want to show you how you can come back into something and change it after you've dragged it into your overall composition, just to show you guys that it is possible. So if it looks like I'm being a bit backwards, I'm not, I promise. So for now, I'm just gonna, that phone message one that I've made, the pre-composition, I'm just gonna click away from that and I'm gonna click back on the editor, and then I'm gonna go onto this import tab here, and I'm going to look for my footage, which I cannot remember where it is now. I think it's somewhere in here. Animation course, yeah, motion tracking. So phone footage, and that's available on that Google Drive link as well. So open that up, bring it in. So this is really high resolution footage as well, which is good. The higher resolution, the better. We might need to scale it down at some point. What I'm going to do straight away is right click on this footage as I brought it in, and I'm going to make a composite shot. Again, like I was saying before, this gives us access to more features, and more importantly, it gives us access to the tracker. So let's call it phone tracking, and I'm going to match the timeline. So you see there, let me go back and recap on that. So right click, make a composite shot. I was saying before, it's very high resolution footage. So at the minute, it's the footage is bigger than 1920 1080. It's almost it's slightly bigger. So what I want to do is I want to match the timeline, and that'll change it to 1920 1080, so we don't have to do any scaling. And let me just rename that. So under name, I'm just going to call that phone tracking, and all the rest of them are the same. So again, I'm just going to reduce that from 30 seconds as well to 15. 30 seconds is a bit long. Don't really want to have that, like the final product being longer than 15 seconds, to be totally honest with you. So okay at that. So it's done exactly what I didn't want it to do. And if it does that, so even though I've set it to that, right, okay, it should have, when I made that the composite shot, it should have scaled this footage down. Sometimes, obviously, sometimes it doesn't, as we're finding out. If this happens, where your footage is like super zoomed in, Daniel's covered this a bunch. So right click, and then you'll get this transform option, and you've got fit to frame. So that'll automatically fit it into the frame there. Yeah. So now, instead of it being super zoomed in on like the middle of her, it's a little bit more viewable. So this is where we're going to start the more complicated part of it. So this is the motion tracking specifically. So if you tuned in for just that, sorry, it took a little while to get here, but I wanted something that we could use with the motion tracking as well. So I've gone over how to create that. So to track any kind of footage, anything on any footage, so you can do this with anything, any object. So you could do it with your own phone. You could record a little bit of video over your shoulder where you're holding your phone. I will look to cover in later session. I was going to do it today where you have more than one tracking point, but I was very aware that this is probably the first time you guys have ever seen this, so that might be covered on a more advanced course. If we're going to look to do one, might even do a one-off session of advanced stuff. That might be like the last week, might be the super advanced techniques. So you can track any point on any footage, on any video footage. You can track any point, and the HitFilm Express will do its very best to work it out. It works it out in a multitude of ways, one being the difference in color. So if I'm saying I want to track the phone here, it knows that this, whatever area I tell it, is different to everything around it. It does get a little bit confused, and much like us all, and you do need to sort of interject, but I'll show you what I mean by that. So to start tracking something, I'm going to zoom in because I know the point at which I want to track. So it'll probably open up your footage. It'll be something like that where you'll be in the center roughly. Yeah, I'm just going to use the scroll wheel on my mouse, or you can come down here and zoom in using say 100% and drag across, but you can just scroll in and out with your mouse like that. So I'm going to scroll right in on the phone so that I get a clear view of this, and then I'm going to drop down the little arrow, and luckily we don't really have to do too much to find where the tracker is. So when you've dropped down your arrow, there's tracks here. So if I press on the little plus, what that's done, I'm gonna have to zoom back in again because it's stuck out, but it's opened up the tracking menu on the right hand side. So it'll open up a little tab that says track. I say a little, it's quite daunting this to look at. You don't need to change any of the settings is what I'm going to say. So if you guys are having a go, single point, because we're only doing 1 point in the minute, you can do more than one, but we're just going to, don't worry about that for now. Single point, position only, method, optical flow. I'll leave it on that. You can, if you're having real trouble, if you're having a lot of trouble with it not picking up the tracking points, so if it's constantly stopping, because a lot of the time it'll do it automatically. So when you press these buttons, it'll go forward through the frame and it'll automatically follow whatever you've told it to follow. At times it gets stuck. If you go into options, you've got what's called an error tolerance. So at 25%, it's going to tolerate 25% error. If the higher you make that tolerance, the more errors it'll accept, but the less accurate your tracking's going to be. So it might, if it's on her hand and her hand's moving, it might start jumping off of her hand and the tracking point might be up here when actually the hand was here. So I leave the error tolerance on the default. Iterations, I also leave that on default. But if you're having trouble, like real trouble, and it's really not working, you can up this error tolerance to say 50, and that might help a little bit. For this one, I'm going to leave it on 25. And I'm going to zoom back in using my scroll wheel to show you the tracking point. So this is what your tracking point looks like. It'll always drop it in as this little annoying square. And if you hover your mouse just inside that red square, yeah, that's how you move it around. So what you don't want to do is grab the outer square, yeah, because that's like the region. So don't grab that. Hover the mouse right over, not over the center point either, because that'll drag your anchor point. You don't want to do that. A little bit fiddly this bit, but you want to grab just inside that red square, just inside. So not on the point, so not on that bit, because that's going to enlarge it. Just inside, so in between the dot and the corner there, I've grabbed that. Yeah. Now this red area is the area that you want to track. The phone is slightly awkward because of its shape. I believe it shifts. Yeah, so I'm going to pick a point on the phone where the square is like sort of right in it. So like that. And I'm going to have to shrink this back down because this is the sort of error area. So the red square in the middle is the point you're looking to track. Yeah. This bit out here is the bit where if it can't quite work it out, that's the area it's going to drop it in. So if this area is massive, this is where it could end up anywhere inside that area. So again, I want that to be quite tight, but I want to give it a little bit of wiggle room so that it can sort of work out roughly where the edge of the phone, because I know that as long as it's on the edge of the phone, that's all right. So let's try and get this track point like that. So we'll set it to about there. And when you're tracking something, you want to start the tracking on the clearest point. So when the phone's the clearest. Now I've deliberately done this, but I've picked a shot where, oops, hang on. Yeah, I've picked a shot where the phone at times is quite blurry because you're not always going to have the perfect footage to track from. So if something drops out of focus or if it drops out of frame, that can present problems, but I want to show you what happens when something is out of focus a little bit so that you know how to fix it, basically. Ideally, you would have a shot of a phone. If you're doing it with a phone, for example, because that's what we're doing, you would have the clearest possible footage of that. Obviously, we don't live in an ideal world, as you well know. So we'll do it with this footage and we'll make it work, basically. You've got to have the winner's attitude and you've got to do what you can. So I'm starting the timeline right at 0 seconds. So as the footage starts, I'm going to zoom out a touch with my mouse now that I've set the point that I want to be on, and I'm just going to take that in a little bit actually to about, I think there. Okay, so about there, and then I'm going to come over to here and I've got a few options. So what these options do is I'll go from right to left. So track forward by 1 frame. So you can do this if you really want to, and I don't recommend doing it this way because it's an absolute headache. You can track 1 frame at a time. So obviously the video is made up, all the video is frames, right? So it's just picture, 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 played in a sequence, and that's how you capture movement. Yeah, so you can do that 1 frame at a time, but I don't recommend doing it that way because, like I say, there's 24 frames per second, and this video is on for 15 seconds. So that's a lot. I'm not going to do the maths in my head because I'll get it wrong, but that's a lot of frames. It's going to take you a long time. And then the next option along is track forward, which is where the program itself will try and work it out and try and keep this red square moving as the phone moves. And then the one next to that is track backwards. So the only time you need to track backwards was if you were starting further along. Obviously, you need all this to be tracked in between. So tracking forwards is going forwards from wherever you've got your timeline set to. So mine's at 0, so I only need to track forwards. But if I was starting at, say, 10 seconds, I would need to track forwards, and then I would need to come back to 10 seconds and track backwards as well. So I'm going to start on 0, and I'm just going to set it away to tracking forwards. And can you see it's worked a little bit of it out? So I've managed to get 1 point in there. It's getting a little bit confused. Tell you what, let me just knock that down a little bit. So can you see there? Now I'm not touching the mouse and it's automatically going. If it loses the tracking for whatever reason, it will stop completely. But can you see it's making a little path in there of where the phone's going? So if I just zoom out a little bit. Yeah, so it's made a little path of where the phone's going. So it's automatically, when I've pressed that button, it's automatically worked out where it is. But can you see now the problem is the phone's changed angle, so it's lost that tracking point. So it now doesn't, the original point that I set was on the back of the phone. Yeah, but now the angle's changed, so you can't quite see that area where I set it to track. So it's stopped, which is handy, because now we can come in and we can reposition this and say, okay, when it gets to this point, I want you to go from here, and I want you to keep track of this bit now. If I just remove some of this error distance. But can you see that's the path? So it's adding each one of these little X's as a keyframe. So it says at that point in time, that's where that object is, and it's just moving that around and tracking it through time. So if I keep tracking forward, it's lost it again. So remember, hold on that middle bit there. So I don't want to lose the phone, so I'm just going to drag that down. Again, lost it. And can you see it's because it's a little bit blurry, so it's sort of losing the tracking a little bit. So I can come in here and just keep plodding along. And to move the frame up or down without zooming all the way out as well, you can grab this hand tool and just click and hold, and then you can move the screen wherever you want. So remember, in between that point and that point, and just drag to where it needs to be. And it really is struggling with this little bit of the footage, so let's just keep repositioning it. Yeah, and can you see it's sort of picking it up again there, so it did quite a bit there. It's working it out, and then because it gets a bit blurry again, it loses where it is. So let's move it down on that side. Lost it again. Yeah, so I'm just going to move my frame down a little bit more. Go back to my move tool. Went a bit Bob Ross there, I don't know what happened. Just a happy little accident. So again, it's sort of, so you see it's jumping ahead itself and working it out, and then as soon as it realizes an error, it stops dead. So I can then move that up to say there. Again, it's got a little bit confused. Really unhappy with this bit of footage, but that's fine. Oh, hang on. So we'll drag that back up so I can bring that back into view. Change that across. Yeah, so it's just following it, and it sometimes looks like it's a little bit out of sync. So it looks like the box is behind it, but when you attach something to this animation path, it looks a lot better. I think it's just a little bit laggy with where the box is in real time. So don't worry about that. So we'll just keep it moving. And remember, we're just dragging it back in. So the end goal of this basically is to get this path here and apply. Remember, we made that animation of the two messages coming in. We're going to apply the movement to that, so that this path here is going to be the path that those messages follow. So that's the end goal with this. So we just need to get through the footage to the point where we've got this full path. So So we'll set that back onto the back of it now. Yeah, so it did a nice little stint there for us. It moved. In fact, no, that's fine. It's a little bit laggy at the moment. We'll just keep it pinned to there. This is where it gets a little bit visually confusing. So you're looking at it, and there's a big loop all over the place. So just try and keep it consistent with where you're placing it. So when it's getting confused, I'm just dragging it back up into this little top area here. Just going to shrink that down a little bit and sort of bring that up. See if that helps. Yeah, so you see it's a way of doing it now, and it's sort of understanding, and it's getting stuck once again. So again, I'm just going to take a little zoom out, drag that across, zoom back in. And like I say, guys, I've picked a bit of footage that's particularly, at times, the phone comes out of focus. And I've done that on purpose so that we can see the errors. So yeah, again, see now it's sort of recognizing it a little bit more. Just going to drag that back into the middle. And my tea's gone freezing cold. Ugh. That's a hint if Dan's listening, by the way. And yeah, so we're nearly there. So we'll just keep tracking. So just track forward is all the button that I'm pressing there, but equally this would work if you had to go backwards as well. Keep track. So you see it's doing it again automatically, which is really good. It's understanding, it's getting there. Yeah, it's got a little bit lost off there. Let me move tool, drag that back onto the phone. Sometimes as well, what I've noticed with this one in particular, it'll stop as if there's an error, but it's in the right place. So if that's the case, you don't have to move. If it stops tracking forward, but you think it's in the right place, just keep tell it to crack on and press again. There, like I mean, I could move that slightly up, but it would have been fine otherwise anyway. And again, it's sort of in the right place, but I'll move it up a little bit. Yeah, so again, there we go, and then it'll do its little jumps. So that, I tell you what, I'm gonna track the whole footage, but you wouldn't necessarily always have to, because that message in, message out animation is only so long, so there's only so long I need it to be pinned to the phone and moving around with it. So far then. Keep that going. Yeah, we'll go right at the end. Hopefully, bring that in again. And Sue, yeah, I've just seen you. You're dead right. It's trial and error at first, especially with something like motion tracking. It's very, very complicated stuff, to be totally truthful with you. I think oh, there we go, man. Look at that. I didn't see if it was service with a smile, mind. It's definitely service. Yeah, I don't think Dan's taking orders for delivery, unfortunately, Sue. Otherwise, we could have had a coffee dropped off. So we're nearly there. Like I say, I probably did. This is probably overkill, to be totally honest. I probably didn't have to track the whole like length of the video, but I think they'll do, because that's run it up to 15 seconds from what I can see. Let me just expand my timeline a little bit. Yeah, so that's ran it up to 15 seconds, which is great. So I've got 15 seconds worth of tracking on that phone, yeah. So if I just scrub the timer back to the start, I zoom out a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. Drag that up. So if I play that through, hang on, what's my render quality on? Say I'm getting a little bit of lag here, so I'm just gonna try.
that one's playing for. I wonder if 2 seconds, guys. Close that for now. Where's my option? I've lost the option for my playback quality. Oh, hang on, do I just need to expand that a little bit? No. Ah, right, it's because I was in the layer, that's why. Right, sorry, my bad. I was in the layer, I'd clicked on layer at the top, which is why it wasn't playing back. I just need to go back to viewer. I'll tell you what, ignore that. So, can you see now though, the way to check if it's done anything, basically, let's just minimize that panel a little bit and that one slightly. So the way to check that your tracker's worked is you come back into your, so I've only got one layer of footage in here because it's the layer that I've been using, and it's the video layer if I'm moving around with our phone. So drop that down. Under that tracks, remember I pressed plus before to bring up this menu. If I drop that down, I've now got this tracker option. And tracking point 1 is that thing that I've just spent the last 10-15 minutes moving up and down. And if I drop that down, that looks like a bunch of nonsense, right? But if I expand the timeline a little bit, what you'll see is that's a keyframe. So at every frame of this video, it's got that tracking point has a position. And that's basically what that entire process that I've just done has done. So instead of me having to come in here and animate that little message in, message out bit to each point that it's at, because you could do that, you could physically move it every time the phone moves. You could move your animation. I use the tracking point instead. So I'm setting out an area and saying, right, okay, I want to track this area across this amount of time, and then each one of them, each time it moves, it gets a keyframe. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, I can recap on that, and I probably will once I've finished this animation itself. We'll do a different bit of footage and we'll have another look at it, because it is quite a bit. It takes quite a bit of time to sink in, to be honest. But each point in time now has a keyframe, and I've just accidentally done something there. So let me just make sure I haven't broken it. No, I haven't. It's fine. Cool. So yeah, you've got your tracker. Each point's got a keyframe on it now, and that's done using that tracking point rather than you painstakingly going in and telling it where to be at any moment in time. So that tracker's great, but it doesn't actually do anything. If I come into the viewer and I go to, if I play it, nothing actually changed. The footage is exactly the same. So that she's still just walking along with her phone, and nothing's really happening. I need to apply that tracker to something. So that phone message thing that I made earlier, yeah, so here's one I made earlier. This one is now going to become part of that other video. So the way we do that is we just look for the composite shot in here. So I called it phone message. So I can literally just drag and drop that in. Yeah. So make sure the layer's on top. Otherwise, if it's underneath, you won't be able to see it because it's going to be behind the video. So make sure that phone message layer is above phone footage. And let me just scoot that panel out the way a little bit. I'm actually going to just move that out and that across a tad. Okay. So at the moment, it doesn't quite work how I want it to work. At the minute, if I play it, they sort of animate in just like over the top of the whole frame. So I need to apply that little motion that I just tracked to this thing here. What I want to do for starters with the phone message, because I can already tell it's absolutely massive, I'm just going to scale it down a little bit. So I'm going to drop it down, and I'm going to go to transform, and I'm going to set that to 50% scale. So I've made it half as big as it was before, yeah. I'm also then going to go back to my phone footage, drop that down, go back to tracks, click on tracker. Yeah, and I get the options back up on the side. So it tells you here quite handily. Step 1, track your points, which we already did. We did all that where we move in the point and stuff. Step 2 is apply to layer. So this is where you all that tracking data of where it is at any given moment in time. We want to output that to something. So purpose, transform, layer, phone message. So that's the one I've just imported. Click that, leave X and Y position ticked, and apply. So now, if I scrub back through my timeline, so it's lagging a little bit on playback, but can you see frame by frame that's following this animation now that I made before? I've brought it in and I've pinned it to the phone basically. So at any given moment, it's following the phone up and down as the phone moves in the frame. I wonder if I can lower the quality a little bit more. Fastest. Let's try that. So can you see as she moves the phone up and down, that animation's moving up and down with it. Now the problem with it at the moment is where it's aligned. So it's not quite working because this point here should be where it's popping out of the phone. So that is actually pretty straightforward to change. So you come back into your phone message, so this one here, and when you click on it, you'll see its animation path, which is that tracking one that we did before. Yeah. So now if I drop this down just to check that it's definitely moving like it should. If I drop down the transform, it's inherited all those like hundreds of keyframes that are created with the tracking point before, so they're now applied to this animation within the video, if that makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know, we'll go back over it. But what I need to do, I don't need to change any of the position, but what I need to do is change the anchor point, so the point at which it starts at. So the anchor point is where it's pinned to, so where it starts from. So I want it to be coming from there, so I'm just going to hover over this left hand side one and sort of drag it. So remember, drag it that way so it starts sort of there. Yeah. So now it's following that path, but it's following it from this edge. So before it was following from the center. Yeah. So let's just skip forward a little bit. So before it was following that path, but it was following it from here, but now it's following it from this side here. What I've noticed as well is that the size is a bit of a problem. So can you see we're losing a bit of this off the frame? So again, I might just want to scale this down a little bit and say make that 25, or maybe we'll try 35%. And then come back to my anchor point a little bit and just shift that to the right a little bit, and then probably up as well actually. So on your anchor point, the one on the left is your left and right. Yeah, and I'm hovering over that till I get that side to side arrow, and I'm just clicking and dragging the mouse either left or right to move it. And then the one next to it, this one here, is up or down. So again, side to side arrow, up or down. So that's where it's positioned within the frame. Yeah, so you see now it's a little bit better in line. And if I move it back, play from the beginning. Yeah, so it pops out from the phone and it's sort of following the phone, and then she's replied. Now the timing's slightly off because as that message going out saying yes or you, as it goes out, she's looking away from her phone. So I might want to tweak the timing with it of when it comes in. So if I do have a feeling, I might need to delete the position keyframes out, which I'm going to do. So I'm going to hover over position, and it should let me delete these, but it might crash now because that, yeah. I thought it might. Let's give it a second. Luckily, I've already got this project backed up, so if it does crash, I can go back to it and show you how to change the timing. Right, I will do that. 2 seconds. Luckily, I did this one yesterday, so it should. If I open motion tracking test up. Another timely reminder to regularly save your work as well. Yeah, so we will definitely look at, just catching up with the chat guys, we'll definitely look at the settings on your laptop. I can possibly even have a look like over TeamViewer. So hang on, you've recovered it. Let's open this then. See what you've recovered. Yeah, so I can have a look at things like settings, and I can give you guys a little bit of advices on like what the best way to do these kind of things are and the best sort of stuff to use, like I was saying. Right. Hang on then. I think it might have rescued me project. Right, so it crashed. Hit Film Express has ever so kindly saved me project and recovered it. So I'm going to do another backup of it. I'm going to overwrite session 1. Yes. So I'm back to it. I'm alive. It's worked. So the timing was wrong. Yeah. So this animation starts a little bit too early for my liking, I think. Let's just minimize that track window there. So we've got a bit more of a timeline view. Drag some of these panels out. Yeah. Okay, so it starts quite quickly. So you see, as soon as the footage starts and she starts moving, it sort of animates in. So that's a little bit early, I think. So I'm gonna move it along, but I need, if I want to change the timing, so what I would do if you were doing it, I tell you what I'll do. I'll go back as if before I added the phone messaging. So I'll delete that out because the timing was wrong, and I will drag in my phone message again. Yeah, and I'll have to just rescale it. So I'm going to come back into transform, not the scale. I'm going to make it 35% because that was what I worked out was the best. So before I give it the animation path, before I apply the tracker to it, I want to decide at what point in the video I want that animation to start. So I wanted to start probably, let me just turn it off so I can see the video footage better. So the video is not playing too great for you guys, but there's a couple of bits where she sort of looks away from. So looks, if I can just find it. Just going to keep skimming through. It's a little bit tough because it is lagging ever so slightly. Wonder if I play it in here on the left hand side, if it will just play. So at about 3 seconds, I think it is, she looks away from her phone. So if I go to about 3 seconds. Yeah, so let's just get rid of that. So I brought my timer to about 3 seconds, 3.5 seconds. And can you see she's looked away from her phone? So that might be a good point for the message to pop up. That then makes her look back at her phone. So to start that animation then, can you see this block here is the animation? So drop that down. This square here, I'm on phone message, which is that animating the message in and animating the message out. That is the animation itself. So if I drag that block to start at 3.5 seconds, so that after that, this block here is when that animation plays. So if I play it through now for you, just to show you what it looks like. So you sort of, again, it's not pretty great. I'm also getting an error message from YouTube, so hang on a second, I'll go back over this. Let me just check. Let me just check the dashboard. Okay, stream quality poor. Let me know, guys, if the video is dropping out, because on my screen it seems alright, but I'm getting a message about not maintaining a smooth stream. It's a cracking cuppa though. Yeah, Charlotte, I'll with your laptop, give it a go, but try not. Obviously, mine's lagging a little bit. Mine's lagging slightly, but it's because I'm running the streaming software. I think if you've only got Hit Film Express open, it should work quite well. And if you're creating things in, like, say, Photoshop or Photopea, try and do it as a bit more of a process. So create something, save it, close that program,
open up HitFilm XS, bring it back in, instead of having the other common mistake that I see people make, or that I make quite often, is I'll have like Photoshop running and I'll have like 10 Google Chrome tabs open all at once and that, and then your computer's already struggling before you've launched something like this. So yeah, definitely give it a go. But basically I brought that back in. I know that at 3 seconds, 3 and a bit seconds, I want the animation of the message to come in, because she's looking away from her phone, so I want the message to pop up, yeah, and then I want her to look back down as she types that message in, so it looks a little bit more realistic. So if I then remember, I need to go back to my tracker and bring the tracking window back in a little bit. So turn that layer back on and apply to layer, transform, phone message, apply. So now, yeah, and remember that now the anchor point's completely wrong. So at the minute it's sort of in the center. I just need to shift the anchor point so it's here. So go back to my phone message, drop down transform, change the anchor point to go this way and probably up just a touch, probably like that. There, that's quite an important frame. So you see, I'd scrub it backwards rather than like playing it through. I'll show you what I've done. So this is it rendering the video, and it does it quite slow. But as she's looking away, that animation starts, so it pings out from the phone there, and then she looks back down. So that was me timing it. So I worked out where in the time on the video that I wanted to come in, and I set that phone message for that block to start there, and then I applied the tracking to it so that it's constantly following, and it'll follow all the way around. She'll do the little reply, and then once she's replied, I'm probably going to have it fade out so that it's not on the screen anymore. So where does it come in? So let it have a couple linger and say at 12 seconds. So I take my timeline to 12 seconds. So 12 seconds there. I'm going to have it fade out. So I'm going to have this animation disappear. So I'm going to set the keyframe for the opacity there. And then I'm going to move a little bit further along. And I'm going to set the opacity to 0. Yeah. So in between these two keyframes that I've just added there, the first one is at 100% opacity. So it's fully visible. And then the next one is it fading out to 0%, and in between that there's not much of a gap, so it'll fade out quite quickly. So let me just play the end and see if it'll render that. So it'll just fade off the screen. It's not quite catching up in the render. What I'll do is I'll export this as well, and I'll show you guys it in real time, because the renderer is just a little bit laggy, and that's on, I think, let's do a quarter resolution on that. And then let's do quick on that and see if that's going to drop down the render quality a little bit. Okay, so you get the idea with the, it's a little bit juddery there, rather easy for me to say. What I would do now is I'd probably add the sounds in. So remember before I said I'm going to go back and show you how to add the sounds in. Dead easy this bit compared to some of the stuff that we've looked at. So if I go back to me media panel on the left hand side, I've got that composite shot that's called phone message. So I just want to double click on that. That'll open it back up here. So what's nice about these composite shots is this one here has now become a part of this composite shot. So phone message is its own thing that exists with all these layers. But when I bring it in here, can you see phone message is one layer there? So to edit what's happening in here, I come into this bit. So imagine it like a group. So that's like the group, and then that's all the separate layers in here. So any changes I make in here will automatically go into this one. So if I add a little bit of sound in this one, it'll automatically translate anywhere else that it's positioned in the project.
which is really good and very useful. So I've got two sound effects. I've got the ding, which you'll probably recognize from last week. So if I just play that, that was loud for me, so that was probably loud for you. Although actually I'll reduce the sound a little bit on OBS. 2 seconds. Yeah, that's fine. Hopefully nobody's deaf. I won't know if you are, so I don't know sign language either, so we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. But basically, when that first message comes in, so when that animates in, I want that to have that ding sound effect. So I'm just going to drag and drop the ding sound effect in there. I'm also going to reduce the sound of it a little bit. So drop down the arrow, audio level. I'm going to do -10 for now. Your meter is over on the right hand side here. Let me just move this tracker menu out the way. So let's take it off. Actually, I tell you what, we can just do that probably. Yeah. So you've got your meters here. That tells you how loud something is. So if that is hitting the top of there far too loud, you come in to the sound layer there, you drop it down, you drop down audio, and you've got level, and you can type a minus number in there. Might even make that -15 to be honest. So yeah, so that as that message comes in, ding, yeah. And then as the second message goes out, so probably if I scrub to a point where it's just about coming into the frame, so about there, I'm going to drag this other, I've got a phone sending message in here. Yeah, so it's just that like iPhone swipey message type thing. Just going to drag and drop that into there. He says as it sort of freezes a little bit. Now, if you remember from before, where this block is where that particular layer is going to play. So I need to just drag that block so that it plays at this point, because that's when that message is coming in. So that block, as that's coming in, you can move that at any point. So if you want to come in slightly later, you can have it start there. I'm quite happy with it to be there. Yeah. Again, I'm probably going to reduce the audio on that a little bit. So drop that down. I'm going to make this one -10. Press enter. And I'll play that through for you guys. So yeah. Yeah, simple as that. A little bit of audio. So that's how you come back in and edit a composite shot. You just open it back up and you can add some more layers to it. Hopefully that makes sense. Half blind, yes, but not deaf. Right, cool. Good. Not deaf yet. I'll try not to play any loud sounds, loud noises. Yeah, so that's adding sound. So if I go back into my phone tracking one now, which is admittedly very loud, but I'll play it through and you should hear the sounds that I've just added. You hear the other one, so you can hear them. We can't quite see them, and that's just due to me playback being a bit buggy. One way to check your playback is to go frame by frame by just sort of clicking and dragging, just to make sure the track ends and things like that. I will see if there's any advices on the HitFilm forums, which are normally pretty good, as to how to get the render to run a little bit nicer. I'm pretty much happy with that, so I might want to export that now as well, which will give us a chance to look at it a little bit better. So if I go to export, don't press the button on export. I'll tell you what I'm going to do first of all before I export it is save it. You can never do enough saves, because file and save will just overwrite your project file that you've created, so you can never do that enough. I've found sometimes during the export, not specifically in HitFilm Express, but in any kind of video editing or animation program, when you're exporting something, it can sometimes just decide that today is not your day. Computer says no, and you're not getting your project, you're not getting your video file, and it'll crash. So I always try my best to save it before I do that. So just file and save, or Control and S on your keyboard, and that'll save that. So don't press your export button when you're ready to export it. There's a little arrow to the right of it, and you can click add to queue. What you might want to do, and what I'm probably going to do, is set some in and out points. So I know that I want the video to end here. So where I've got my timeline, I can come up to here, and there's a little button there, and you'll be able to see it a little bit better on yours, but it's called set out point. So I'll sort of highlight my mouse, it's there.
And then what that does is, can you see it's grayed out everything after it, so it's going to finish there. The in point is fine to leave at 0 on this in this particular instance. What you could possibly do is scrub it in a little bit further, because can you see me animation for my phone message coming in doesn't start until there. So there's all this space in between where nothing's really happening, it's just her walking. So what you could do is make it a little bit shorter by just bringing that in, and then next to where we just marked the out point, there's an in point there. That, and it's grayed out everything before that, so that this video is going to start at this point. Yeah, and then to export that, go over to this little arrow again, hover down to add to queue, so add to queue, and then in out area, because that's the 2 points I've just saw. So start, end, click in out area. I'm just going to remove these old ones so that you guys don't get confused. The easy way not to get confused between new ones and old ones is that one's finished, this one's not. As a rule, I leave it on YouTube 1080p HD. That's full HD, it can go anywhere. This one's a slightly higher resolution if you were working with higher resolution footage. I set my project to be 1080p. If I change it now in the export, I'll end up with some form of black bars around it. It'll either be along the top or along the side. So I'm just going to leave it on YouTube 1080p HD. The output bit, quite important. This is where the file's going to go. So I've got a folder called exports on my computer, which is on the desktop. So this PC, desktop, folder, exports. That's where I keep all my exported footage. You guys might want to save it somewhere else. You might want to export it to a memory stick or a hard drive, like an external hard drive. One note to make on that is your export time's probably going to go up. It's going to take a little bit longer to export to a USB or a phone or a external hard drive, even if it's an SSD, because it's writing to something that isn't part of the computer, which, as you know from copying files, as you know from copying files, it can take a little bit longer depending on the size of it. This, you can see the duration here, 11.1 seconds. That's not very long. Typically, your exports on things as short as this shouldn't take too long. If you've animated something or you've edited a video together and it's an hour and a half long, like some of our recorded sessions that I've got on YouTube are, that's going to take some time, especially if your computer's a little bit older. Just for now, while you're messing around, I know Charlotte and Sue, you're saying you guys are going to have a little play around. Try and keep your animations a little bit shorter. I would say between 10 and 15, well, between 5 and 15 seconds will be great. It'll be grand. You'll struggle to export stuff any longer than that. The reason I showed you the in and out point as well is because another classic mistake that I've made many times myself, I even submitted work at uni by doing this, is you don't mark an out point, and there's like, you've set your timeline to be 1.5 minutes long, but your animation's only 10 seconds. So for that, the rest of that, 1 minute 20, it's just dead space. It's just black, plain black, and the video is still playing out. So useful to mark your in and out points. So just to recap on that, you're scrubbing to the point you wanted to start. You're pressing mark in. You're scrubbing to the point you wanted to finish, and you're pressing mark out. And then you go into export. The little arrow next to export, add to queue, in out area, yeah, and it'll take you to this. And then once you've, like I say, leave it on whatever the preset is, normally this one, and start exporting. So if I click start exporting, it'll give me a little progress bar there, hopefully. And there you are, it's telling me the progress through it. It's also telling me the time that I started it and how long's remaining. You'll notice that I'll start ticking up quite well. And then I get my progress as to how far it's gone. And Gary's there as well. Hi, mate. But yeah, hopefully the export process is probably the easiest bit that we've done. But can you see here, it's giving you a frame by frame preview. So it's showing you each frame that it's exporting. And can you see the tracking is working like live there? So you can see the message tracking on there, and you can see the other one coming in. It doesn't play the sound on the preview, which is fine. We don't really need it to be totally honest. It's also telling you here the preset as well. So YouTube 1080p HD
H.264, which is the video codec if anyone's done Daniel's streams. And it can be compressed and played at these frame rates as well. So if you're doing a video or animation that you want to upload to YouTube, this preset's like amazing for it, because YouTube will just accept it straight away, which is really good. Don't worry about your audio formats. 48,000 hertz is fine. That's pretty good quality. Plus the 2 sound effects we've put in aren't particularly like, it's not like it's a speech. You know, if it's someone's dialogue, you might want the audio to be a little bit at a better rate. If it's just like that little sound effect, not really a problem. You'll get that awful Windows noise when it's finished, and you'll get the progress bar saying that it's finished. I believe if you press on the output, it loads the file as well in its place. So you can see it's highlighted phone tracking there as well. So if I double click on that, we'll have a little play of this. So I'll let it play through once. And it should fade out. There we go. So one more time. Yeah, so you see the sound effect plays as it comes in. And can you see, so some of my tracking points are a little bit jagged, so that it's sort of jumping all over the place. So that would just be a case of, like you said before, so trial and error with it. But can you see the effect that it generates? Yeah. So it's at any given moment, the speech bubbles are then following the phone as she moves them. So if I move a little bit slower, and they're animating in, can you see the little bit of motion blur on there as well? So as that comes in, it's not just scrolling on the screen. It's got that motion blur as if it's like whipped in. So hopefully that makes sense for you guys. So I'll play that one once more through. Yeah, so I timed the footage as well, so that animation starts playing. That wasn't a sound effect, by the way. Someone's at the door. That animation starts playing as she's looking away, so that our attention's then grabbed. So she's looking straight ahead. Then the animation plays. So she gets the alert on her phone, and then she looks down and she starts tippy tapping away with her thumb, and that's when the message goes out. Yeah, and those little sound effects as well can take it from being quite a like. It gives it a little bit more realism to it as well, because they're the sounds that phones would make as well, especially an iPhone, which is the colours that I've picked. So when I created these PNGs of the message bubble, I did it using the colour dropper on what an iPhone's one were. Stuff like this, when you're doing animations, it's really good to create your own. But don't think that means you have to do them from memory. You can grab stuff off the internet and recreate it using like things like the shape tool in Photoshop or Photopea. And as long as it's an original shape that you've made, it's not an exact copy. So, you know, I haven't exactly copied the one that Apple did. I've made my own. You can do it that way as well. So hopefully that makes sense, and we'll just see a little fade out. So it just fades away there as she goes back to farting about on her phone. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to quickly have a break while I clear all this stuff out, and then I'm going to show you guys how to just do it with just a bit of text. So instead of the animation that's coming in, we're going to have a little recap on exactly how the tracking works with just a little bit of text. But I'm just going to have a quick break while I turn this all around, and I'll be back in 5 minutes or so. Probably not even, to be honest. Let me know if that's made sense, what I've just shown you in the export and stuff. And also, if you please don't mind, I'm not going to play the alarm, because I've already tried to make you deaf once today and you don't deserve that. But if you could fill in the survey while I quickly turn around my desktop and turn around Hit Film Express, that would be fantastic. So give me a couple of minutes, guys, and we'll have a little look at some other footage, and we'll make it even, we'll simplify it a little bit more. 2 minutes. Okay, I'm back. Managed to spill my tea on myself as well, which was nice. That wasn't what I intended to do. That wasn't why I took a break, but never mind. We move on. So, I've cleared all the stuff out. Yeah, so cheers for doing the survey as well. Yeah, I appreciate that it's a little bit complicated. So I'm gonna dial it back a little bit for the last sort of portion of the session. That's tough to say, that one. I'll stick my teeth back for that. So yeah, the last sort of half an hour, I'm going to do it with a different bit of footage, but I'm not going to create a little animation first. I'm just going to track the footage and apply some text to it. So to do so, I'm just going to, remember, import. So I'm going to import some different footage. And this, so they're the bits we've been using so far. I'm going to bring in this man surfing now. And just play that. Oh, that's got sound on it and it's quite loud. Hang on. Let me just drop that down a little bit. That's really loud, that one, right? Anyway, there's a video of a bloke doing some surfing with like a wetsuit on, looking very fashionable there. So same as we did before, I'm going to right click and I'm going to make a composite shot, and I'm going to call it man surfing. 9:31, I believe, is the length of the video, so it only goes for 9 seconds, sorry, 31 minutes. So I'm happy to leave it at that. 1920 1080. The frame rate on this one is quite high, so it's 60 essentially. So we'll have a go at this. If it becomes a problem, I will instruct you on how to change that, but I don't think it'll be an issue, to be totally honest with you. So if I OK that, so again, I'm just going to right click, I'm going to go to transform, I'm going to fit the frame just to make sure it's right. Okay, so a little bit blurry to start with, so I'm going to try and get to a bit. I'm also, I tell you what, just going to take the audio off completely because I can't really deal with that, right? Yeah, thank goodness for that. So I need to try and find a frame on this where it's a little bit clearer. So if I skim through my frames, so this button here is previous frame, the one next to it's next frame. So I'm just going to skim back a little bit and let it catch up. Look for a frame. Let's do that. I think that's probably a decent place to start. So I'm just going to start here. So I brought my footage in, I've fitted to the frame here. I'm just zooming in now so that I can start setting up a little tracking point. If I change the paused resolution to full, render this frame, hopefully, yeah, so it's going to render that frame there. And remember, tracks, so you drop down the options there, tracks, and that'll add a tracker to it. And I've done the same thing again. I need to zoom back in. I need to bring that tracker menu back across. I'm going to shrink down some of the other windows, yeah, and then I'm going to drag that up. So my tracking point, if you remember, is this, and to move it, I don't click on the little corner point there, I don't click on this corner point, I don't click on the middle, I sort of hover in between these two, so my mouse is inside the red box. I just drag it to there, scale that down ever so slightly. I want to track this guy's head, right? So I want to attach the motion path I want to follow is this guy's weird like latex, I don't know what it is, God knows, I don't know what he's wearing, whatever he's wearing, like his wetsuit, but it's got some kind of weird hood on it. Anyway, that's what I want to track. Now my timeline this time hasn't started at 0, so I'm going to have to do a track forward and I'm going to have to do a track backwards as well. So what I'm going to do to start with, because it's, if the distance is short, I'm going to track backwards. So it's run through, I'm not clicking anything, it's automatically doing it. Now the video footage is 60 frames per second, that's a lot of frames. So it's tracking each one, that's why it's going a little slow. Can you see, because there's a clear differential between, oh dear, hang on, I think you might be dropping some frames here. Yeah, so there's a clear differential between his head and the sea. It's quite easy for it to work out at the moment. So it's just do its thing, and it's going to lag me computer to the point where you guys can barely see anything. So let me know how the video is, because I've been getting a couple of messages on my end that it's lagging a little bit, and that's due to how many frames it's analysing at the moment. I'm just going to keep cracking on with it. I'm tracking backwards at the minute. Time's going backwards towards the start. I'm hoping you guys are still seeing this, but let me know if not, and I'll recap. But if you can see, which I'm hoping you can, it's quite clearly understanding where his head is in relation to everything else in the frame, because of how different the colours are. So this is quite a good one for it to capture. So I'll let it do its thing, and then I'll try and explain in between, so if it is dropping out. So can you see I've tracked that back to the start now? Yeah, so from where I started all the way back, pressing the track back button. Now what I need to do is find the point at which it started, which is there, and I need to track forwards from that. So forwards from here. It's lagging quite a bit. Okay, so to explain, so I started here, yeah, you can see that from that square there, and then I tracked backwards, so it tracked his head all the way back, and then with that one I didn't actually have to move. So you remember on the phone one, because it was so blurry and like the HitFilm Express couldn't work out the difference between, say, the phone and the background. On this, this guy's head is so clearly different to the waves that it can work that out, and it's added all these little points in automatically. I haven't had to do any clicks apart from to click this button to tell it to track backwards. So it's added the tracking data between where I started and the beginning, so 0 seconds. What I now need to do is track forwards, so that it does it between now and the end of the video. But I did see a couple of things in the chat, so let me just see. We've got a bit of lag, yeah, that's fine. Like I say, we've got our animation path from start to here. Now we need to get from the rest for the rest of the video. And Sue, you're saying, is the tracker how they do the green screen and CGI animation in films? Sort of. So it's a bit more complicated than this, but basically they have a suit on, so they'll motion capture someone. So they'll wear a suit with a bunch of tracking points on them. And those tracking points will be assigned to certain parts. So they'll track, like, say, if it's your hand, if it's your elbow moving, they'll have a tracking point, say, there and there, and probably a couple on your arm, and they'll be able to track where your arm is at any given point, which they'll then apply that to a character. So they'll build a character like in a 3D modeling program with the same points. So they'll give it an elbow and a wrist and a shoulder joint, and then they can match the person who's wearing this big suit. It's normally got loads of like big sort of baubles on it, and they can match those points to that character, and then as that character moves, the computer generates the image of the 3D animation moving as well. That is like really high level. You know, like Planet of the Apes is one of the famous ones. I can't remember the actor. Daniel will be able to tell us that, almost guaranteed, who plays the main monkey in that, the main ape. I can't look it up because I'm too scared to open another Google Chrome tab in case it blows my computer up to smithereens. I will Google it on my phone though. Hang on. But yeah, that's like massively high level motion tracking. It's the same principles essentially, but instead of it's using footage of people in its 3D. At the minute, this is sort of 2D, so it's just like left, right, up and down. Whereas in 3D, you've got like forwards and back, and you've got all sorts of movement. It's very interesting, to be fair. That's him there. Andy Serkis, that's his name. I think he did Gollum as well in Lord of the Rings. Gollum and / Schmeagol, I believe. So we've tracked backwards from here to the start. We're going to track forwards now. So we'll stop talking about movies because I'll go on all day. So I just press track forwards. So I just keep tracking forwards. It's getting a little bit carried away with where it's going, but it's fine. Yeah, so it's still tracking his head. It's going a lot faster than it was before. I'm just going to let it run through the end. So this is doing it all pretty much independently of me. And it's got a very smooth motion path in there as well. Now, the reason it's got... And then he falls into the water. So we'll probably pause it there. If it'll let us. Yeah. So I'm actually going to delete some of them keyframes out. I didn't realise he actually fell down, to be totally truthful with you. So that point he hits the water there, I might want the text to disappear. So I'm gonna highlight these keyframes here from after that one. So that's the last one I want. So I'm gonna highlight all them. And I'm just gonna delete them because that's the point I want the tracking to stop. So it's tracked it to the point that he's dropped into the water. So if I take it back to the start. You can do other things like that as well. So you can super it. So you know the tracking position is just where. I don't know what's going on here. Yeah. So it's just where this dot is. So I could put the tracker on his head if I wanted to replace his head with someone else's head, and use this path so that the head was placed over all the way around. If you practice at it, you'll get good enough at it where you can have it moving around as well in 3D. For now, I just want you to worry about left, right, up and down while you're getting used to it. But can you see I've tracked forward and back to the point where this guy takes a little bit of a tumble into the water? Yeah. So I've got my tracker. What I now need to do is I'm just going to add some text to this. So I'm going to go back to my viewer. I'm going to scroll. I'm going to go down to scale to fit. And I'm going to go back to my text tool. And I'm going to type some text in, and I'm just going to type in surfs up. I think that needs an apostrophe in. This is where my grammar's going to get pulled to bits by everyone watching. So surfs up. I need to change that text, remember. So highlight it, Control A, and remember my text options are down here, but they might not be visible. So I might just need to press that arrow, come down to text here. Yeah. And I want to change the color, so I'm just going to make that black again, just so we can see it. With it being a title, I might want up to be capitalized. Again, grammar, the grammar crew's probably out there screaming and shouting. I can also change the font in here, to be fair, which I might do. So I might have a little look at some other fonts. I don't think I've got any like surfer fonts because I don't know what such thing would look like. I'm just gonna go for something. Oh God, there must be something in here. I'm tempted to pick an absolutely awful one, to be honest, but I'll not. I'll behave. I'll behave myself. There we go. That'll do. That's quite nice. So I'm also gonna make that a little bit bigger. I'm gonna make that 100. I'm not going to worry about any of those. I'm going to speed duration transform. No, we don't want to mess around with any of that. What I did want to do was add a drop shadow. So on my text, click on there, drop drop the down little menu, effect, plus, and then I'm just going to search for shadow, if I can spell the word shadow, which isn't great. Drop shadow. Yeah, so I've added a drop shadow on it. I drop that down. I'm just going to take that highlight off. So on me drop shadow, I want to can we render this or not? Effects disabled by quality profile. Right, I'm being an idiot. Apologies, my apologies. I need to turn my render quality up so that I can see it. Draft. So if I add my effect back in there, drop shadow. Yeah, so there's a little shadow underneath that now. When you've got it on the lowest quality, it will not show you things like your effect. So I'm just going to turn my shadow opacity up to 0.75, and then I'm going to move the scale up a little bit. No, I'm not. I'm going to leave that on 1. I'm going to change the position, sorry, the distance. Yeah, and angle, how it come that way a little bit. I'm gonna knock the opacity down a little bit actually, but you can do things like this. You can add glows, anything you can add in Photoshop basically. But I'm just gonna do that, and I'm also gonna change the color of the text to. Do I want it white? Do I want it like something awful? Oh, that is awful. What about? Oh no. Trial and error, guys. Trial and error. You want something that you can see. That's the main issue. But maybe it's like off-white, or maybe. It sort of blends in with the water a little bit too much, doesn't it? But I could do that and then add an effect and do. You know, add a stroke. Hang on then. You can emboss it a little bit, maybe. Tell you what, let's not emboss it because that looks awful. Let's just make the colour a little bit darker again. What about that? Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so got me text. So I've already done all my tracking, which has got all them keyframes in there. Remember, all I need to do now is I've done all this. I've tracked forward and back, and I just need to apply it to a layer. So transform, which means move it around, left, right, up and down, X and Y position, that's what that is. To the layer, it's called new text. What I'd probably be better off doing is, remember, right clicking on my new text layer, and don't click remove, which I always go to click it to rename. Rename that so you know what it is. Go back to your tracker and apply that to your text layer, and then click apply. So that's moved that there. So if I scrub back to the start, see, it's again with the anchor point, it's not quite in the right place. So to sort that out, remember, we come back into the text layer, we drop down transform, and we're looking, don't edit your position, do not click and drag any of these because that will change these keyframes. You want your anchor point, and you can move it left and right, up and down. Yeah, so that's left and right, the one on the left, the one on the right. So here is up and down, so I might want to just take it up there. So if I play that through now, it's just following him as he does his little surf, and then he falls. As he falls into the water, what I might want is that to disappear then. So if I just scrub along as he takes a little bit of a tumble, so he's starting to fall there, so I might want to set the opacity, first keyframe for the opacity there, and then he hits the water sort of there as I've moved it a little bit further along. So then I change the opacity to 0, press enter, and that disappears. So let's play that back through.
Yeah, and it just that disappears as he disappears into the water. Yeah, does that make sense, everyone? Hopefully, I'm gonna save that. I'm gonna do file and save because I'm terrified that it's gonna crash. So I might want to export that now. I might be happy with that, champion. You know, I've messed around, fought around with my layers. Probably much to your annoyance because I was trying to work out how to put a glow on, but then I thought we'll just go with a drop shadow. That's another thing you guys can have a go at. In your effects, just see what they look like, things like shadows and glows and all that kind of nonsense. But I definitely want this one to start here, so I don't need to mark an endpoint because that's 0 seconds. What I might want to do is scrub to the bit where he falls in, because he's obviously not very good at surfing. I say, having never ever touched a surfboard in my life. I don't intend to either. But I might, after he fell in, that's sort of the end of the clip, so I might want to mark that as an out point, which is that little button there. So mark that out, and you can see everything after it is now grayed out, so it's not going to export anything after that. I also want to, so if I just now go to the little next to export, don't press the export button, press that little arrow, add to queue, in to out area, again another mouthful. Come back in here. Can you see there's the one I previously exported, but it says finished, so I can just ignore it. The one that's highlighted is this new one that I'm doing. If I drop this down, is there a way? What I was trying to see. If there was a way to export it without audio, but I'm not sure there is, to be honest. I'm going to make a new preset. I'm going to make it MP4. And I'm just going to untick audio. Keep frame source, aspect ratio, yes. I'm going to call this preset no audio. Don't worry about this one. This is specifically because I don't want the audio to come out. So I'm going to OK that. Go back to my queue. And then there's a preset that I've created called no audio there. This might go horrendously wrong. You guys stick to your YouTube 1080p HD. I'm going to test this now. So I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to click start exporting, and then it's going to give me a little preview of that 60 frame per second footage. Yeah, I know I've said the word fart like twice now, well 3 times now, so I don't know what that's about. I think it's because normally I would have said a word that I shouldn't have said on YouTube, so I've managed to tone it down to the word fart, and that's 4 now. But you know, it's better than swearing. Can't be being rude on a Friday morning, man. It's not what I'm about. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to ruin anyone's weekend. So this is just going again. I've set this to be no audio, in which by the looks of it, it's worked because it's not giving me an audio rate here. So normally it would be how many thousand hertz it is. It's none because I've unticked that audio and I've created a preset for it to export at. So if I know I'm exporting animations or any kind of video without any audio on, I can do it that way. But I wouldn't worry about it. Don't worry about that. You guys just do it on your YouTube 1080p HD. And then it'll linger on 100% and hopefully... Yeah, there we go. There's a horrible Windows noise. And if I click on output, I've got my file called man surfing. So if I just open that up, yeah, so you might notice as well your frame rate. So this one is at 60 frames, which is why it looks a lot smoother. So it's 59.6 or something like that. Can you see the motion looks a lot quicker and sharper? That also translates to your animations. The higher the frame rate, the smoother it's going to look. But don't worry too much. Don't get bogged down with your frame rate and stuff. As long as your project match the footage. So there's 2 different frame rates that we've worked with today. That one
this motion tracking one. Was it this one? I can't. I've made so many of these, I can't remember. These ones are at quite a slow frame rate, so can you see this seems to, she looks like she's moving quite slowly. The frame rate's a little bit slower. With your 60 frames per second footage like this, you'll notice it looks a lot smoother and a lot quicker. And it's just how fast the playback is and how clear it is. So these ones tend to be higher quality when they're at 60 frames per second. But it also makes your animation look a little bit smoother as well. So there's no like, can you see when I'm scrubbing through this, this is remaining smooth. It's not like juddering all over the place. It's quite a smooth, nice tracked shot. So when you do a motion tracking, it can be quite useful to have higher frame rate footage and also higher quality. Definitely aim for the best quality footage you can get. I've given you two examples there. One's really high quality at 60 frames per second. The other one I included just to show you how you can do it even if your footage is slightly blurry in places as well. That's when you have to do a bit more trial and error stuff. It's all in that Google Drive, all of it. Let me double check actually. I might be talking out my backside here. I'm pretty sure I opened it at the start of the session, like, but I'll double check just for you guys because I'm that kind of guy. I'm just such a nice bloke. Yeah, so you've got everything you need in there. So you've got the two sound effects I used, you've got the phone footage and the message bubbles that I made, and then you've also got your man surfing to have a little bit of a mess around with. You know, download them, have a go. Don't, like, if you're not feeling too confident with it, because I've rushed over stuff, pause the video, come back, take it a bit at a time. Start with the man surfing one and the text. Maybe do that one first. Maybe do that as your first exercise. Just try and get some text following this bloke's head. That'll be great. I think I have a lot of faith in you guys, and my emails are open if you're really struggling as well. I don't mind setting aside a little bit of time to help you guys. If you do make anything, please send it in to me, and I will have a go. And if you've got a version of it that you're not happy with, but send me the version you've got, and I can maybe give you some pointers on how to sort of improve it or make it a little bit easier for you to do. You know, you might be doing something the long way around. No, not your mom. I'm not making your mom jokes either. Not your mom surfing, the man surfing. But yeah, guys, that's I'm gonna leave it there because we're out of time for today. But that's motion tracking as easily as I could explain it. I know I talked about replacing adverts on buses and taxis and things like that. It's possible. I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave that for more advanced sessions for now. I think this is the way to go for now. Just tracking one part of a video. I've done a phone and I've done a random bloke's head, which is weird to say out loud, but there you have it. So have a go at that. Like I say, my email address is, you guys know it anyway, but for anyone watching back who's catching up on the streams, I will drop it in the chat now. And if you could also, obviously you guys watching now have probably done it, but for the purposes of people watching back, I will put the survey link back in there as well. If you guys could check that out, that would be massively appreciated. Everyone who's been in the chat today, I'm going to be in touch with an enrollment form. I'm also going to make a note of that right now on a piece of paper. Send out enrollments, and if you guys can get them back to me, I'll probably have to send out two for that because last week's was technically the week before, sorry, was a taster course. So there'll be two sets of them, but I'll guide you guys through them the best I can, and give me a shout if you get stuck. Oof. Any idea when the one-on-one drop-in sessions might start? So I'm really not sure at the moment. When we get that information, it'll probably go out on social media and on Staying Connected as well. When we know when like face-to-face and one-to-ones are going to start up. Just try and keep in touch with us. Obviously, you guys are quite regular. You know, Gary, Charlotte, and Sue, who's in the chat today. Anyone else as well? Just keep dropping by the streams, or like I say, if you've got a specific query, the Facebook page is monitored by all the staff, and so drop that a message if you don't want to. Obviously, if you want it to be in private, message one of us individually via our emails, which is just our name, first name @mediasavvycic.co.uk, and have a go with the hit film.
express stuff, the animation stuff, motion tracking. I'm expecting some good things from you guys. Have a go at your own time. Give me a shout. You guys know how to get in touch. And stay safe. And we've got Staying Connected on this afternoon, so drop by for that. Cheers, and I'll speak to you guys soon.